Hey, everybody, welcome to the Women in Tech interview. We've got Tiffani Bova. Got a treat for you. Of course, she's done a lot of things in her career. We're going to get down to the bottom of exactly her journey and where she was. And she was recently doing some keynotes over the Ingram Micro show. And that's where I got a little bit of information about her. But Tiffani, first of all, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Thrilled to be here.
There you go. So now I know you're in transition and you're doing some crazy stuff right now and moving from one place to the other. You've done a lot of things, but just give me your journey as you started way back. And then let's get up to today, and then we'll talk about what you're planning to do new.
Sure. Look, it was an accident that I found myself in this thing called the channel. I got hired like almost 30 years ago, 25 at a small software company, and I was the only salesperson. And I was like dialing for dollars all day, and it was in the legal industry. And there was this law, technology, product news magazine. And this is kind of 1997-ish. And I was reading an article in there, and there was an ad for this thing called a value-added reseller. Like, hey, if you want technology, come to us, law firm, and we can get you hardware and software. And I'm like, hold on a second. Like, why am I dialing for dollars all day? Why don't I just go ask them to sell our software, right? And that was sort of my first introduction to what a VAR was. And I took the sales from sort of, 100,000 a month to almost a half a million a month. And my CEO at the time, right, was like, this is great. Let's go find more of these value-added resellers. And that was kind of my first little toe in the pool of understanding the value of distribution and the supply chain. And then very quickly over the course of the next kind of decade, I changed jobs every 18 months. And I went from a software only company to a hardware and software bar to then a systems integrator who sold software, hardware, and services. And then I landed at distribution at a company called Intercom until they went bankrupt. And then I landed at Sprint and helped them stand up their professional services division. And then I went to a little web hosting company, and I was one of the first to stand up an indirect channel program in this thing called the World Wide Web cloud. I think I stood up the first VAR program, if you will, for cloud services and as a service services, and really recruiting this new generation of partners. And to put that in context, this is 2000. So it's not like I, just started on this cloud journey a few years ago. It's been almost 23 years. And then I left the cloud world, and I was hired at Gateway Computers when they were closing their stores to be their first channel chief, to really stand up an indirect channel program and get the products into the hands of VARs that were selling, IBM at the time, might have been selling HP at the time, but Dell was selling direct, and so they had to figure out how to compete. Did that for a couple of years, built that business to almost 250 million. And then I said, I'm tired. So I spent a decade at Gartner as a research analyst and became a research fellow covering indirect channel strategies and advising startups and some of the largest technology companies in the world and how to improve their channel programs and go-to-market models. And then I spent almost 8 years at Salesforce, being an evangelist around all things related to growth. So it's been a crazy ride, but one where it has been super rewarding and hopefully very impactful for my customers.
If there was ever an example of someone who proves the value of the channel, I think you would be that picture in the dictionary. It's amazing. So from those beginnings and actually demonstrating very clearly that it's you can do so much alone, but with the channel you can do that plus so much more, right? And you've taken that along with your career. So you are, definitely the trendsetter in the channel for sure. Now, here you go. You've not only done these things, but you've written some books. You've talked about all sorts of things. Tell us a bit about the books you've written, first of all, and why, and what does it do, and what is it about?
So my first book, GrowthIQ, was really a culmination of my 15 or so 20 years in the fight, right, running sales, both direct and indirect marketing and customer service. And then advising, like I said, some of the largest technology companies in the world to stand up their first channel programs. Someone like Dell, like I helped them sort of operationalize with Greg, their channel chief at the time. Microsoft going from on-prem programs to as-a-service programs. AWS standing up their first channel program. And so I had my hands in a lot of pies, if you will, and I got to see firsthand sort of what was working and not working when it related to growth strategies. So GrowthIQ is really homage, if you will, to what I learned along the way. And it was 10 paths to growth. Two of those paths, one was partnerships, which would be an obvious, right? And one was co-opetition, working with companies that you may view as a competitor in a partnership manner to do 1 + 1 = 3, especially in the channel. So it could be something like VCE as a great example, right? Or out of technology, it could be loyalty programs in the airline industry, right? I can get on one airline and another airline in the same loyalty program, and it's seamless. And that's a great example of co-opetition, right? They fight for, my seat, right, for me to do that. But there's certain reasons why, as a customer, I need those airlines to work together, even if they view they compete. So 2 chapters were really focused on it, right? Partnership and co-opetition. And then my second book, Experience Mindset, was really the 11th path, if you will, that I missed in GrowthIQ, around the power of employee or partner experience in delivering compelling customer experience to drive growth.
Bravo and wow. Okay, so now there's a lot of talk these days about partner relationships and customer experience and so on. What do you think is wrong with, and what do you think what people are getting right, what people are getting wrong when they look at their partnerships when it comes between vendors, in particular distributors, and their partners?
Well, I think this has always been the question, kind of who owns the customer, in air quotes. Is it the vendor? Is it distribution? Is it the value-added reseller? And I'm just going to use that as an all up, right? The managed service provider, VAR, SI, cloud provider, just the channel in general, whatever that sort of makeup is. Within that supply chain, the end user customer, if they're a small business, that IT, VAR, reseller, SI is their outsourced IT department. And so if something goes wrong with the technology, who do they blame? Do they go to the partner? Does the partner then say it's our fault, or it's distribution's fault, or it's ultimately the vendor's fault? The customer sees kind of it's the partner. And so understanding as a vendor and distributor, less so on the distribution side, but especially most focused on the vendor side, is understanding that supply chain, the relationship between the two. Because the only person, and I've said this literally for 20 years, that owns the customer is the customer. Like, the partner doesn't own them, the vendor doesn't own them. Like, the customer owns themselves, right? Who they choose to do business with is their own decision. But when they have needs or when they have an issue, they want to feel that that partner they've decided to do business with has their back, which then means vendors have to pay attention to the experience that partner has with them, ultimately because that partner is representing them in the eyes of the customer. So if the partner, for some reason, feels like the vendor's not going to back them up, or they're not giving them the appropriate training or what they need to be successful, that partner themselves will say that experience with the vendor's not great. I'm going to go to another vendor. And it may have very little to do with the actual products and services. It may have to do with, even though their product is really great, I can't get anyone on the phone when there's a problem. Or on Saturday when I'm transitioning, the routers and switches and shutting down the internet connectivity for the business, and something goes wrong, I need the vendor to be available so that we can get the customer back up and running before Monday morning when everyone shows up to work. That kind of, especially for a managed service provider, that kind of service is part of the experience. And so I think that thread of the supply chain of the experience all the way through from the OEM to the end user customer, you have to keep line of sight on that.
That's some great advice and insights, because a lot of people, they lose track of these things because they're in their own little silos and tunnels, and it's me type thing. And so that's some amazing stuff. Zooming out a little bit, looking from a woman in the tech industry in particular, what do you see? We hear the data that there's not enough women in C-suite spots. There's not enough. The industry is not attracting enough women, but it's starting to change a little bit. When it was the pandemic, it's sort of like women left the industry a little bit more than men did. What's your take about that? And what do you think is missing? Why is this a problem still today in 2023?
I don't know why it's still a problem, but I'd say, when I tell people that I've been in tech literally for 30 years, they sort of look at me, right? And I go, I most definitely was one of the only women selling technology when I started selling technology, number one. Number two, as I started moving up in organizations, I for sure was one of the only women sitting at the table. When you talk about channel chiefs, when I first started, Allison Watson was running worldwide channels for Microsoft. There was a handful. Julie Parrish was doing it for Symantec. There was maybe 3 to 5 female channel chiefs. It was kind of Ricoh, Microsoft, Symantec. I don't know who else I would even call into that. That were women. So, it was hard for me to go, I see what I want to be. But what was amazing was each one of those women, and I remember their names like it was yesterday, and I remember the conversations when I was very early in my career in sort of 2001, 2, 3, 4, right? And those sort of formative, they would give me time and give me a perspective on, how to navigate all this. Now, I'm going to put a little asterisk next to it. I may be naive, but I never felt I got a job or didn't get a job or got an opportunity or didn't get an opportunity because I was a woman. Again, I may be naive to this, and I might have just put blinders on and been like, really, that's their problem, not my problem. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. But I would say that channel marketing is very heavy female. Mm-hmm. So, it depends where you look in the industry. Technically, just in STEM in general, there's a shortage of women. But when you look at marketing, there's definitely a lot more women. In sales, it's gotten way more balanced than when I was there, no question. And in leadership, it's gotten more balanced. In the C-suite of the Fortune 500, we've gone backwards a little bit, collectively cross industry, not just from a technology standpoint. But I remember when Carly Fiorina became the CEO of HP, and I was like, wow, and then it was Ginny Rometty, and then, there aren't many still women that are sort of leading these large technology companies. And I think that's a miss, and not because of women. I just mean diversity, because who are the customers? Who are the clients? It isn't just about women and men. It's about people of color. It's about, creating technology for people with disabilities. Well, is there anyone on the executive staff that actually understands that? And yet people are designing for it. So I think there's so much more opportunity than just men or women. I think that it is fluid all the way around, right? There's intersectionality between all kinds of things that we need to take into consideration. And I think that representation is important specifically for technology, because tech is so ingrained in everything we do personally and professionally at this point, globally. I mean, no question. There's more smartphones than toothbrushes.
Maybe we don't hope that, but yeah,
I
guess that.
Truth. But it's the truth.
The dentists are going to be all happy. The reality is, of course, diversity reflects the world, right? And tech companies are now global, right? And if you don't understand what people in different countries and different walks of life are thinking or doing, then how do you really match them, right? And the big challenge these days is because AI is sort of going to ruin the party for everybody, right? Who the hell is really, developing the AI and teaching the AI, right? Because if the wrong folks teach AI a certain way, then AI can be very, very, how can I say, they can pick and choose certain things, right? For example, I think when they were, testing cars at one point, the crash test dummies were just designed like a male. So then every time a woman gets in a car and had an accident, they got, hurt really bad, until they figured out, no, there's lots of other different kinds of bodies that go into a car. So eventually, I think that's sort of where the trend the industry has to go. When you were going through this whole channel experience, were there things that you saw that that you'd like to highlight, that maybe that would help other women, advice you would give other women and how they could navigate the this industry?
Well, I remember I think it was 2001 or 2002. I was at, the very first Women of the Channel luncheon at VAR Business Magazine's exchange event. and there was like 8 people in the audience, and 4 of them were men that were working for sort of Bar Business Magazine, right? There was a panel of us, literally. And now it's become, there's, carved out events. Ingram Micro does stuff, right? That you guys will do things, other channel industries will do things where they're really reflective of it's important. And so, over that 20 years, I've watched that event go from 8 people in the room, right, to 1,500 in a room. And so the support that's gone around that, the intentionality of channel chiefs and of leaders of technology companies to make sure they're making investments in some of the areas that have to improve diversity, but also to, sort of raise and lift the voice of those that may not still be around. But there's something I wanted to say back to that comment about AI. Data bias has been there forever. We're just now talking about it. I mean, if we say that mostly technology is designed and developed by men, and big data has been around for much longer than we've been talking about at the public level of GPT and AI, that data has been not great from the beginning, right? Because it's been developed with a bias, so it spits out a bias. And so now that GPT and AI are more prevalent, we're having different kinds of conversations. But I still think this goes back to that comment, right? If it's only one group or one type of whatever, that would be like saying only hardware resellers are being asked to answer questions in a focus group for a company that sells both hardware, software, and services. You're going to get a bias. If you only put software partners in the room, you're going to get a different bias. If you only put service partners in the room, you're going to get a different bias. If you only put cloud providers in the room, you're going to get a different bias. So, partner advisory boards tend to be a cross section, or you'll have an advisory board for each, and then you bring the findings together, and then you can sort of pull it together. But that kind of understanding of you would never do it for hardware only, software only, services only. I mean, I would hope not. Even if you're a software only provider or a hardware only vendor OEM, never in the supply chain is it only one thing. I mean, right? So if you don't understand the dependency of each of the others, even if you don't have anything in the portfolio that satisfies that, like you don't sell anything in networking, but there's no way to deliver mobility without networking, and your product is a mobility product, you need to understand the implications. So, having that very narrow focus in anything that you do when it comes to growth, strategy, channel development, right? Direct versus indirect conflict, developing programs, any of those things, you want to make sure that you're widening your data points so that you can see the signals. You may say they're not relevant, but at least hear them and go, oh, well, wait, hold on. Well, while not relevant, this is interesting. We should consider this. And I think that's where you have really robust conversations, and you have the opportunity to have a beginner's mind and not a fixed mindset on the answer because you've been doing this a long time, versus looking and asking questions from others that may bring in new points of view.
Yeah, I mean, the old saying, you don't know what you don't know. And interesting enough, a lot of channel chiefs or channel people, what they do is they'll always go to their top 10% of their partners and ask, what do you think? Do you think we're doing the right job here? And of course, the game is already, skewed to their benefit, right? So yeah, keep it going the way it is, right? But that means the other 80, 90% are not at the table, right? And if you serve only, that group, then it's fantastic, right? But you need to have
it's hard to scale the long tail, right? Yeah. So you focus on the 20 that are driving 80%, 20% that are driving 80% of your revenue. You leave out the 80% that are driving the 20% of revenue because it's easier to scale that. But sometimes the greatest learnings are in the long tail. It's how do you do that using things like AI and automation to capture that information in a low touch way, because the other part of the business is very high touch. So you don't want to ignore that they're not important, because if your competitor figures out how to treat that group of long tail better with a better experience, you risk losing them. And then they may grow with them because someone actually paid attention.
Yeah, we see it every day. But another question I wanted to get from you is, you've got these young kids coming up, right? They are who they are, and they're coming up with a whole different set of, rules and regulations, I would say, about lots of things, privacy included, and so on. But they're what should they do as a career? Their challenges, right? They're thinking, what do I do, right? Do I go to school? Do I go to university? Is there value anymore? You have people saying, don't go because it's not worth it anymore. There's lots of people with opinions. What would you say to those young kids about why tech should be an industry where they should consider, particularly women, girls?
Yeah, look, if you have any interest in it at all, I just say go try and do it somewhere.
Mm.
So if you're young and you want to be a marketer, market for your church or your softball team or your youth league or your kids' youth league or their softball team or your whatever you want to do. Like if you want to market, go try. If you want to sell, start somewhere. If you want to get into technology, start to learn. Now there's so many ways in which you can learn self-learning online to get certifications, whether it be Google, whether it be Salesforce, whether it be Microsoft, whether it be anybody, right? There are all kinds of online learning to bring those up that maybe don't have college degrees. To earn those skills. I think more and more companies are going to start hiring for skills and not necessarily, education formally and or work experience, especially around these new things like GPT and AI. Nobody's got 5 years experience. It's like when the web came out. You're not going to find someone with 10 years of UX design experience for, the internet in 2000, but yet everyone was looking for it. So you want to hire for curiosity and skill development, then you have to continue to invest in that sort of career pathing for those people. But if you're interested in it at all, I just say, go start doing it. Learn on your own, low code, no code, volunteer for something and work with a local SI or value-added reseller, or get into marketing, whatever it might be. My best piece of advice is if you want to do something, go try find a way you can do it, even if it's for free initially, while you have a paying job, and then get to a place where you've got your skills and you can go get paid for it.
Just jump in, I guess. So my last question is sometimes, we go through our careers and there were pivotal moments, maybe it's a mentor or you'd like to go back, and I wouldn't do that if I had to do it over again. Do you have any do-over type moments that you want to share, or people that
and in sort of the last minute that we've got, I'd say, this is what I'd say. I was a high performing seller and I got promoted to management and then, management and then leadership, et cetera. And with each of those, I was not necessarily trained on what it meant to be a sales leader or a sales manager or to be a marketing leader or a customer service leader. I was an operational, I was successful operator, if you will. And the time between when I started getting promoted to when I got actually coached and mentored and trained on how to be a leader was maybe a 6-year gap. And during that time, I probably was a terrible leader. So if I could have a do-over, I would say, I would hope that now I would be a better manager, leader, mentor, coach, champion for the people who work for me versus sort of driving for that productivity and just creating burnout amongst my teams and myself, by the way, that I led the way I was led, and where I was successful. That's sort of how I led and how I thought success looked. So I'd say if I had to do over now, I'd want to be a better leader than I was last time.
Oh, that's a good one. The last question is, what's the future? What are you on to now?
I don't know. My book is a couple months old. I'm just on the backside of after a 7.5 amazing years at Salesforce. So I'm right in this figure out what's next for me phase, and I'm excited to see what's around the corner.
Well, we'll keep watching, Tiffani. So thank you very much. And if everyone they want to learn more about you, or what's your website address? I think you have your own, right?
Yeah. Yep, it's TiffaniBova.com, and it's TIFFANI Bova.com, and I'm very active on LinkedIn and social. So follow me, drop me a note, and Julian, I appreciate you reaching out and giving me an opportunity to speak to an audience that I have a huge amount of love for the channel.
Well, it's our pleasure, and we'll be following you. So keep us posted as new things happen in your world.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day,
Cheers.
everybody.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.